We're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2058. Eureka! My best genealogy breakthroughs. So I have some real life examples for you of where we have taken a mystery, taken something that has been difficult to find, and how we found it. So how do you start even looking for the stuff? Again, like any question we ask ourselves in genealogy, we write down what we know. So we might have, we need to find, like, for example, I'm trying to find my third great grandfather, William Henry Morris Price, who died sometime between 1851 census and I can't remember his wife's marriage date, but it was in 1852. Yeah. Do you know how many William Prices there were that died between that time, and none of them have the middle name of Henry? So it's making it a little challenging because we also don't know his birth year. And we can't look at the 1851 census because he's not listed at home on the 1851 census. So how do we start? We start by writing down everything we know about William Henry Price. We create a spreadsheet that has like all the fields in that we need to fill in, like birth, death. We've got his marriage date filled in. We have his approximate for his death date, approximate place because we know where he last lived, because it's written on the baptismal record for his son. So we put in there everything that we know, and then we've just got to start with checking vital records, seeing if we can find them on the 1851 census. There are a lot of William Prices on the 1851 census that were around the Essex area. Well, he obviously wasn't at home in Essex when his wife was there with their son. So we've got to get a little creative. Where was he? There's a lot of William Prices out there. Sometimes on a census report, they would put their middle name if it was mentioned, and sometimes they would not. So we don't know if he mentioned his middle name or not. And of course, we don't know when he was born. So we have to look at this logically. If he was on his marriage certificate to his wife, it put that he was a bachelor. So then bachelor A, and he was a full age. So bachelor age at that time had to be at least 21. So we've got the year he got married, which was 1850. My second great grandfather was born in November of 1849. Do the math. Yeah. And he got married in 1850. So we have the wedding date. So yeah, they weren't married very long before he passed away. So was he an older person, or was he being of age? Did that put him around the age of 21 or in his 20s, around the same age as his wife? Or was he older than her? And it might have been his second marriage. Well, actually, no, because it said he was a bachelor unless he lied. So we're looking at that situation as well. We know his father's name because it's written on his marriage certificate. So we put in every bit of information we know, and then we start from there. We start looking at other records. What can we find? And try and narrow things down a little more to see if we can find him. So that's where we always start. So let's go and have a look at some of the things that we have found over the years when working with clients and tell some cool stories along the way. So every genealogist dreams of the Eureka moment. Trust me, that Eureka moment is like a high above high. The moment they discover this discovery that changes everything. Like back in the early 2000s when we found my second great grandfather's baptismal record that blew everything wide open. That was a huge Eureka moment for us. There's been a lot of Eureka moments since then. So tonight we're sharing amazing genealogy breakthroughs and the strategies behind them and how you can have your own history-changing moments. Excuse me. Here is a fun fact. Hang on, I'm going to need a lot of water tonight. My mouth feels very dry. I've already had 2 of these today, and these are 40 ounces. Let's have a look. Fun fact. In 2018, a study found that 60% of Americans can't name all 4 of their grandparents. But genealogy research can help you improve that. Yeah, 4 great-grandparents. And the grandparents are your parents' parents. There's 4 of them. 2 for dad, 2 for mum. Yeah. I was very fortunate in the fact that I got to know all 4 of my grandparents throughout my life. It wasn't until I was late teens, early 20s that they started passing away. And I also had the privilege of getting to know one set of my 8 great-grandparents. Yeah, so you have 8 great-grandparents because everybody has 2 parents. So out of my 8 great-grandparents, I was fortunate enough to be able to spend some time with one of my sets of great-grandparents, which was awesome. I absolutely love my great-grandparents. I love going to their place and the house that they lived in and things like that. So, yeah, and my great-grandmother died when I was about 8 or 9. And then my great-grandfather passed away when I was a teenager. So, yeah, there was a few years between them, but I had the privilege of getting to know them, which was awesome because some people don't get a chance to meet their grandparents or their great-grandparents. But anyway, let's go through some amazing genealogy breakthroughs and the most surprising family history discoveries that we within our network here have found, within our network here at Your Family Tree Detective have found. And these will be some before we even opened Your Family Tree Detective. So some of these are from before I even took on clients, when I was just helping friends out. So the DNA test surprise, finding a secret family member. Ha 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 ha. I had a client who took a DNA test just for fun and discovered he had a half sibling he never knew. Turns out his father had a child before marriage that was never mentioned. And DNA doesn't lie. DNA shows the blood relations. The genealogy, you then have to figure out how you are connected. And so the unexpected match can reveal hidden family connections. Now, back many years ago, there was a guy that turned up at my grandfather's place, at Papa's place, and claimed to be descendant from an uncle who was, so when my, hang on, I got to remember back. When my great-grandfather passed away, he was the one that fell into the river. When he passed away, his wife was pregnant at the time, and she already had 2 little girls. And so when her 3rd child was born after he had passed away, he was put up for adoption. And through research, we found the family through research, and this is boots on the ground. This is way before we had the ability to look up things online. So this is back in the 80s. Back in the 80s and the 90s. But we found who the person may have been that adopted my great-granduncle. And so this guy had shown up, and he was a descendant from my great-granduncle. And he didn't want anything from the family. He just wanted to know where he came from. Now, years later, we could probably go and get somebody in his line to do a DNA testing to see if we have that connection. So DNA can tell us that you are blood related, just not how. Ancestry tries to be helpful, and I say the word try because they will put there that there's this many centimorgans in common, and that means that you fall into possibly being this type of a relative, of a cousin, and all of that sort of stuff. And it's on your paternal side or your maternal side, on your father's side or your mother's side. And sometimes they are kind of correct. Other times they are not. I had one who was a 3rd cousin once removed, and it turned out she was actually on my mother's side of the family, not my father's side. And we were researching the heck out of my father's side of the family and her father's side because there were a lot of surnames in common. Could we still be connected on my father's side of the family? Possibly. It is possible to be related to both sides of the family, on the mother's and the father's side. There could possibly be a connection there. But I suddenly stopped one day and I said to her, what's your mother's maiden name? And what's her line of descent? And boom, like that, we blew everything open. And I go, I know where in the tree you fit. And that's how we found out she was a 3rd cousin once removed. Now, some people like, have been asking me, what's this cousin removed and everything else? So I found a handy dandy chart. Now let's see if I can remember how to share screen on this thing. I want the cousin calculator. That's it there. Yep, that's the one. All right. Let's see. Let me come back here and see. Okay, this is the cousin calculator. All right, so you go to the common grandparent. So in this case, my second great grandmother. So this is my this here is my grandparent across the top here. This is my cousin's grandparent in common. Okay, I'm going to see if I can blow this up a little bit for you so you guys can see this a little clearly because we only need this portion of it. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Okay, you guys can read that. Good, excellent. Okay, so what we did is that we had my second great grandmother is our connection. Now, my second great grandmother was married twice. Once to my great grandfather, and then when he passed away, she got remarried. And this person comes off the line of of her second husband. So we have a second great grandparent in common, which is actually going to make us a half third cousin once removed, because my second great grandmother is her third great grandparent. So if we come along here, you can see here that if we come down from the second great grandparent and across from the third great grandparent, we intersect at the third cousin once removed. Now, because we don't have the same set of grandparents, only one grandparent, it is a half third cousin once removed. So my second great grandmother is her third great grandmother. That is our connection. And we were half third cousins once removed on my mother's side of the family, not on my father's side. So this is how you can do this. So first cousins, you have the same grandparents. So those are your parents, siblings, children. Okay, so you got your aunts and uncles, they have kids, they're your first cousins. The removal comes in. If I told you guys my funny story, I've got to tell you my funny story about this. The removal comes in is if my first cousin has a baby, then our common grandparent is her great grandparent. So they become first cousin once removed. They're a generation removed from the first cousin's line. If you have the same great grandparents, so those who I have my great grandparents in common with are my second cousins. Just how it works. So my dad's first cousin's children are my second cousins because we have the same great grandparents in common. Okay, clear as mud? Awesome. All right, does that make it a little clearer? It's just how many generations are you removed from the same level as your cousin? And which grandparent do you have in common? So that's that chart I actually got from familysearch.org. It is one of the charts that they have. And if you type the cousin calculator, it'll come up. That's actually a PDF file that they have, so it can be downloaded and printed and that sort of thing. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah, so we found that this woman was my half third cousin once removed on my mother's side of the family. We are still going to keep looking for the father's side of the family because we have so many last names in common on my dad's side of the family that it could be possible that there is also a connection on my dad's side of the family. And yes, that is possible. You're probably going, how? I'm glad you asked that. So this is on my maternal side. So somebody somewhere on my maternal side is related to is related to somebody on my dad's side, possibly through marriage. So there could be that connection there. But we'll have to just keep tootling away at that one and see what we can find. All right. So that was the first one. So DNA, very, very important in helping uncover family relations. You just got to figure out with the genealogy how. The other one was we had a friend who was researching her great grandmother, and she found a letter from 1892 in the attic that revealed her ancestor had changed her name to escape an abusive past. So now that she had the original name of her great grandmother, because she could research back to her great grandmother, and then there was nothing. We could find nothing beyond that. But when she found this letter, it put in there the reason that she had changed her name was to escape an abusive past. So what did she do? We could now, because we had her original names, poof, suddenly we could find the rest of her family, and we started building that tree back for her. And that was one of those Eureka moments. It's sort of like, oh my gosh, she says, you're not going to believe what I found. And I'm like, what? And she says, I found this letter from 1892. It's my great grandmother, and this is da 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 da. And she read the thing to me and was blah 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 blah. And so as soon as we got that, and I said, what was her original name? She told me what the original name was. We popped it in the tree, and of course, we started with what we knew, and worked our way through. We started looking through the vital records being births, deaths, and marriages. And we started looking through those. We also, as we had the original records, we found out where she had come from, because she had escaped from the state that she was originally born in. So now we had that information in basically the letter gave us all of the information that we needed to be able to trace her. It gave us why she changed her name, what her original name was, the state that she escaped from, who her abusive husband was that she escaped from. So now we could get hold of her marriage record. It was just like it was a huge gold mine, this letter. And it was only a couple of handwritten pages. Yes, we did have to decipher the handwriting, but it was a couple of pages that was handwritten out. Everything was in there. Explosion. Sometimes you get records that are like that, which is pretty cool. So if you don't just look at official records. Remember, look for family letters, look for diaries or journals, newspaper clippings, parish records, anything that may hold that untold story. Newspapers, great resource. It really is. It really is. And we have a story about that coming up as well. So that one blew that case wide open, and all of a sudden we were able to go back into her family tree and all of that sort of, and go back a few more generations for her. Very, very happy about that. We had another case where we couldn't find a client's great grandfather before 1910. So we could find like the great grandmother, we could only take him back so far. We took him back to 1910. We couldn't find anything before that. So we had no birth records, no marriage records, and nothing like that. And after digging a lot deeper, we found out he had changed his last name to avoid debts and was listed under a completely different surname before that. So ways that we found that was we tried different spellings. He did have kind of a common name, kind of, sort of. It was one of those borderlines. It could be a common one. It may not be, depending on the area. We tried searching for phonetic variations. We tried nicknames. We tried alternative spellings, and we eventually did find him that way. And it took us a lot to realize that this was the person so we found this name, and we thought, well, could that be him? So of course we then took that information and we started researching that particular person a little more to see if he fitted in with other information that we already had. So we had information on his parents. We just didn't have information on him. We had information on his siblings. We couldn't find him. So we had found the siblings. We had found his parents. So we found the second great-grandparents, found the siblings. And we eventually, when we found this name, which was a different variation on the spelling, and of course a different pronunciation because of that, we then started researching this and found out that was who he was, and he had changed his name and we found a court case where he had been brought up on charges for being for owing money. And so we just started researching from that, and that led us back to the families, and now we had found his name. It took us a little bit, but we got there in the end. And again, another Eureka moment. So have you ever discovered a surprise in your family tree? Think about any unusual names, missing records, or family rumors that you've heard. Different strategies that you can use to lead to discoveries. DNA testing and genetic genealogy. Oh, this is fast becoming one of my favorite things. The more I learn about how these two work together, the more fun it's becoming. So use DNA matches to find common ancestors. If you're a distant cousin match, look at their tree. We had a client who was searching for an unknown grandfather, used ancestry DNA matches to connect with a third cousin who had the missing family information. We are finding this over and over and over and over again. I have a cousin that I'm trying to find right now. He has a detailed tree. I have a detailed tree. We can't find anything in common on either trees, but thanks to Ancestry's DNA match, they have in their Pro Tools where you can compare matches. So I thought, well, let me give this one a go and see what happens. So I went to his profile and I clicked on the thing to compare matches. So in this column here, we have my name and the people that I match that are the same. And when we have his name in another column, and then it's got matched up. These are the people that we have in common through DNA. And so I'm looking at these names and I'm like, hang on, some of these have the little symbol on here, which means that I have verified that we do have a DNA connection, and we have verified what the genealogy connection is. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So I had a father and a daughter, and I had two sisters who were matched up with. And this was the interesting thing, because in some cases we were identically matched as far as being like a fourth cousin once removed. They predicted on his one that it could be a fourth cousin once removed, or it could be a third cousin. And on mine, it had a definite fourth cousin once removed. So where I had already made the matches, it had what the match was. And the other ones, it just estimated. So they were very, very similar. So we're kind of in the similar thing. So I then looked at these two families, the father and the daughter and the two sisters, who was my common ancestor with them. And I found out their common ancestor goes back to my second great grandfather's family. And when I looked at his family, he had a slew of siblings. And these, the two sisters and the father, both came off one of the sisters of my second great grandfather. So then I was sort of like, okay, wonder if he has this in common. This maybe, and maybe this is where the great grandparents come in. So it would be my third great grandparents would be our common ancestor. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they led back to the third. Sorry, hang on. Rewind. We led back to the my third great grandparents being the grandparent in common. My third great grandparents had a few children, and I think it was like 7 or 8, and there were a few girls in there. The father and the daughter came up through one of the daughters of my third great grandparents. The sisters came up through another daughter of the third great grandparents. Mine was off one of their sons. So that's how we got back to that third great grandparent. So I then sent a message this was just a few days ago we discovered this. So I then sent a message off to this cousin who we don't know the exact relationship with, and said, hey, this is what I did. This is what I discovered. And then I went in and says, this is the last name of my third great grandparents. This is their last names, hers and his, or his and hers. They went on and had these children. They had this number of boys, so they would all be of this name. And then they had these daughters. Here are, and I think I listed like 6. Here are the daughters and their married names. Do any of these names appear in your tree? So now I'm waiting to hear back from them, because if any of those match in the tree, then we know where he falls in the line, and we just have to make that connection. So now it could be that that we may go back another generation to the fourth great grandparents, but I don't think so. I think we're going to be staying on the third great grandparents line, and he may have descended from one of we're going to start with that, because that's where the commonality has come in, and see if we can find a connection through the children of my third great grandparents, only because there's already 2 strong connections to those third great grandparents, and we have those cousins in common. And now it could be that that there's another generation involved somewhere along the way, where it could be that he comes up through one of the siblings of one or the other of my third great grandparents, but then that would put our fourth great grandparent in common. And when that happens, it means that we would be 5th cousins, which throws everything off a little bit. But then ancestry is not always correct in predicting the centimorgans on these things. So that's one that we're looking at right now. Digging into old newspapers and obituaries, I tell you, these things are gold mines, and there's a lot of people out there who don't think to use newspapers. So we had a client who was trying to confirm his ancestor's birthplace. They were living in a different, as far as he knew, everybody was from this particular state, and he couldn't find any records for his great grandparents and for some of the grandparents' children. excuse me. And but what he did find, we went looking. I said, look, let's go look in the newspapers and see what we can find. So we looked in the newspapers. We looked for marriage, birth, and obituary records in the newspapers. We found, this is so cool, we found a wedding announcement. And the wedding announcement was one of those that turned around and said, on this particular date, this couple got married. They got married in this particular church. She was wearing this. He was wearing that. These are her maid of honor was this person. This is how they are related. Here are the bridesmaids and what they were wearing and how they were related. And they were named and put in there how they were related to the bride. Were they a friend? Were they a cousin? Were they a sister? And then on the groom's side, it had this was the best man and he was wearing this. And this is how he's related to the groom. And here are the groomsmen and how they are related to the groom. And then these are the people that were in attendance. And of course, when it put the people's names, it put in parentheses the states, the city and state that they were from, which was very helpful because it listed out of town guests. And so because of that, there were some of the people that he's been looking for. They weren't from that state that the marriage took place in, where he thought everybody was from. They were from another state. So now we had that information. And again, a Eureka moment. All of a sudden, we're finding all those vital records that they needed. Births, deaths, marriages, going back a couple more generations. So look at those newspapers. You never know what they're going to find. School and church and land records are often overlooked as well. When census and birth records don't exist, church baptisms, school rosters, property deeds may fill in the blank. Again, another client was missing an 1860 census record for an ancestor. But we found him on an old school roster. We knew that was that he went to the school in the area. We found the school roster and he was on that. We still don't know where he is on the 1860 census. He could have been off visiting somebody on that day. We don't know, but we do know that he was living in that area and attending school. So we're still looking at other relatives in the area, like grandparents. We're looking at the grandparents' census records. We're looking at aunts and uncles to see if we can find him listed on one of those, because he'll be listed either as a grandson or a nephew on one of those, or even a brother-in-law, because he had a sister who was old enough to be married. He was the youngest one. So we're looking at what older siblings, especially girls that he had that were married, or even the guys that were married, and was he visiting those? That one's an ongoing one. We just recently discovered him on an old school attendance record. So, which strategy do you need to try in your genealogy research? So now we've got some wilds. We're going to go a little wild now. We've been pretty tame up until this point. So let's go a little wild, shall we? Because these are really cool. We actually found out that a woman, I had a client, female, who was researching her Texas roots and found out that her great uncle was a wanted outlaw in the 1880s and was featured on most wanted posters at the time. We found him through, we could, there's things we could have looked up: criminal records, court cases, even prison registers, if they are available online. But we found a court case on that. So we then went and looked to see if we could find the police report and everything else, and everything came together. So that was one of the cool ones. He wasn't one of the most famous outlaws that were wanted, but he was wanted. That's all we knew. But his name wasn't one of the famous outlaws that you hear about all the time. And then we found a royal connection that wasn't actually a royal connection. You're going to go, huh? So, client, he was told that he was descended from Scottish royalty. That was the rumor in his family. So we started researching, and we took, this is taking those family myths and legends that sometimes have a kernel of truth, but the facts can get twisted over time. So as we decided to see, okay, was he actually part of descended from Scottish royalty? Well, the Scottish royalty family trees are very well available online. And so we thought, okay, we're going to have to research back. We actually found out that he was the royal family's gardener. So he did have a royal connection, but not in the way that we were thinking. His ancestor was the royal family's gardener, and we found that on a census report. Yeah. So, and then you've got the story of the soldier who wasn't a soldier. We've got a client who believed their ancestor fought in the Civil War, but military records showed he actually paid someone to fight in his place. He didn't want to go to war, so he paid somebody to be him in the war and go fight. So look for substitute records like military pensions, draft exemptions, and court documents that may reveal the full story. He was brought up on charges. We found the military records with the court documents in there about how this ancestor had paid somebody to go off and fight for war, because we had those military records. We thought we had his military records until we came across these court documents that said, yeah, no, that wasn't him. I was like, wait, what? And when we digged further, reading these court documents, we discovered that he had actually paid someone to fight in his place. He didn't want to go to war, so he paid somebody to go to war for him using his name. So this whole military record that we thought he had, and he had a couple of awards in there as well, weren't actually his. He had never earned them at all, but we found court documents later on where he was court-martialed for paying somebody to fight in his place. So, there's all sorts of stories out there, I tell you. And just by thinking of out of the box places to go to get the research, doing some of these lesser known records, you could actually uncover that key that breaks everything wide open. So look deeper. So genealogy is full of surprises. Whether you're uncovering long lost relatives, solving name change mysteries, or discovering hidden pasts, every breakthrough brings you closer to your family's story. Your challenge is to look deeper into your family records, check on old newspapers, review DNA matches, or ask relatives if they have journals, family Bibles, stacks of letters, anything that can help uncover some mystery. If you've made a surprising discovery, write it down, because your family's next generation will want to know. It could be one of those stories that get passed down through generations. Remember to cite your sources so that for generations to come, they know where to go to find the information, and they're not going to be like, well, how did they find that information? Sit there scratching their heads and discover that it was in some letter or it was in a family Bible. If you put that information in there, it makes it easier for them to find, especially if the families today are digitizing a lot of these records for our family use and using a program like Forever. Up here in the top right-hand corner, you can scan that and get your own free account. You'll get 2 gigabytes of storage that is yours, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase for anything that they have. But it's a great place where you can digitize family photos, family documents. With my clients, they all get a free account with me, and I go and create the account, and then I upload any documentation and photos that I find, and I put them into albums for each person. And in the description for the album is written, this is the person's name, and in parentheses their birth year and date. And this is the stories that we've uncovered so far. And we put that story together based on the documentation and the photographs that we have there for them to be able to go in and have a look at them. So breakthroughs happen when you least expect them. Keep searching, keep asking questions, keep digging into history. You never know what you will find. Check on, that was another one that we had. We had somebody who was, they heard a rumor that there was a disaster in an area where family lived. They hadn't been able to find any death records for this person because they had lost a relative. They said they were in this area, and then there was this tragedy that had happened in the area that had made the newspapers and stuff. And so we went to the newspapers and had a look, because she couldn't remember the relative's name. It was one of those side branch ones, and she had heard the rumors about this. So we found the article in the paper about it, and we went, and they had a list of those who had been taken to hospital, those that had deceased at the scene. And then those that were in hospital, they then reported a few days later if any of them had since passed. We found her relatives in that listing. So then we went to the death record. We went to the death records and were able to look her up. And what was really cool, okay, it was a tragedy situation, but what was really cool genealogy-wise is that they were all in a book and everything was handwritten in. And this book was filled in, and it said that they died from injuries sustained in this particular tragedy, and put the date and the time of the tragedy and what it was. And as with anything, what's before it, what's beside it. And they had in the book, they had on this side of the page, on this, so when you open the book, on this side was written the information, the death certificate of that person, and then their back and the other and the left-hand side page was blank. So when you come across a book like that, always turn it over to see if there's any message, anything written on the other side. And there was stuff written on the other side. It said that she came in, that she checked in, that she was brought into the hospital, the date and time she was brought into the hospital, that she had her children were with her, that she had children with her, and the children had been released, had been sent home with, and had the name of the people that the children went home with, which turned out to be, because she was a single mom, it turned out to be other family members who then took these children in and raised them as their own. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? So go find, go look, go search. If you need help on ideas or anything, send us a private message. We're happy to help. If you need help with research or anything like that, just send us a private message. But with that, we're out of here. Go find your Eureka moments. If you have had Eureka moments, please leave them in the comments below, because we love hearing these stories, because it means that people are out there. They're digging. They're curious. They're digging. I love mysteries. I love reading them. I love watching them. Books, movies, real life, not real life ones. I'll watch and read them all. But when it comes to genealogy, that is like the ultimate mystery of all. It is the ultimate puzzle. It will never, ever be completed. But my goal is to make sure that my family has as much information, that I have expanded the tree in a way that saves them a lot of time later on. Maybe they'll be able to find records I haven't been able to find yet. Maybe they will find that key that unlocks another piece of the tree, another piece of the puzzle. My goal is to make that tree as big and as verified as possible before I leave this earth, and so that they can then pick it up and carry on with it. So that's my goal with my family tree. What's your goal with your family tree? Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, go on out.